Happy Monday, Alabama fans. I know that's not something you want to hear very often, but today you have Tim Watts, that BamaOnLine publisher, that's me, and in the master's hat, the master of recruiting, Andrew Bone. Look at that smile. That'll get a smile on his face. Happy to have you guys. We've had an exciting weekend. Not always good news, but there is good news hopefully on the way. Later in the week, we're going to discuss the Alabama decommitment. We're going to discuss a commitment announcement this week from one of Bama's top targets. We're going to discuss a few guys' stocks rising, high school senior football season started. But first, do us a favor, hit that like and subscribe button. We really appreciate all of y'all for being here. We love doing this show. We have a good time, and it's been a heck of a run with Kalen DeBoer. So Andrew, I guess the big news this weekend. We'll let's start out with let's start out with the good news first. Let's start out with AK Deer. Let's start out with AK Deer, number 2 running back in the country, set to announce tomorrow, Tuesday, the 20th. We don't have a time yet. We're assuming it's going to be after school. I believe everybody's back in school. But let's talk a little bit about AK Deer from Mississippi, the mighty Mississippi, the SIP. Brings a lot of nightmares for Bama fans and fans across the country when it comes to recruiting, though. But what are your thoughts on AK heading into this decision?
Well, I think everyone's excited that AK is finally going to be announcing a decision. Everybody tried to make tried to set a date for him before he ever set a date. Everybody
Yeah.
was, it was going to be July the 4th. It was the day after he committed or decommitted from Ole Miss, and then it was he's going to announce a commitment at the Champions Cookout. But none of that happened, and AK never said when he was going to announce a decision. It was all kind of on his own, and now he's come out and said that he's going to announce his decision on the 20th, so Tuesday. So big commitment coming up tomorrow. It's got a top three: Alabama, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State. Now, interesting thing about his recruitment over the course of the last month and a half is he hasn't taken any visits outside of a trip back to Tuscaloosa. So he was back in Tuscaloosa for that Champions Cookout weekend. Had a great time over there. It was around a lot of Alabama commitments, including a couple from Mississippi, and Caleb Cunningham and London Simmons. So, this would be a huge win for Alabama if they're able to get him on Tuesday.
Yeah, and I think it helps. I mean, there's a lot of angles there. AK's been a frequent visitor to the Capstone, so he's familiar with Alabama. Daniel Hill, the running back from Mississippi that signed with Alabama last year, who had his own roller coaster ride, they are close. And of course, Robert Gillespie, while it's a new staff, Gillespie's not new. He's been recruiting AK for some time. He's also from Mississippi, so there's a lot of connections there helping Alabama. Right now, we have our RPM, our prediction in on Alabama, and have since June. Not ready to change at this point. Still like where it sits right now. But we do think, as far as this kind of player going forward, if Alabama lands him, what he brings to this class, what he brings as a player.
Yeah, and going back to the prediction in June, we made that prediction before he even decommitted from Ole
Long time
Miss.
ago.
And so that's a kind of a rare thing for us to do. But I mean, this is a 6 foot and a half, 200 plus pound running back that's got great speed. I mean, he is a home run hitter. I was watching some of his film the other day, and he can take it the distance. He's a explosive back, physical back, reads the hole as well. But once he hits it, he's gone. I mean, that's a guy that rushed for over 2,000 yards during his junior season, had 27 touchdowns, and I think 22 of those 27 touchdowns were in the back half of the season. So, he really came on strong towards towards the end of his junior year. So, this is a guy who is a top 5 running back across the board throughout the entire country for every recruiting website. On3's got him ranked as the number 2 back in the country, and certainly has been a big target for not only this Alabama staff but the previous Alabama staff as well. I mean, Robert Gillespie, as you mentioned, recruited him for Alabama, but Nick Saban was also all over AK Deer last year. When his recruitment really kind of took off.
Yeah, I think when you're looking offensively, what it brings to you, we're dealing mostly with Kalen DeBoer, Nick Sheridan, and what they're doing offensively. But it gets their running back because you've seen them go and find their tight end, put together a fantastic offensive line class, probably the best in the country, one of the best we've ever seen. Wide receiver group reached out and got a couple of guys like they wanted. Got their quarterback. One of the, you took a kid as a 3-star in Keelan Russell, 3-star committed to Southern SMU, and Alabama flipped him. He's a 5-star. He's just shown out. this whole summer really improved his stock. But the one thing they haven't committed, this staff, Kalen DeBoer, is a running back. And yet not only are they committing one if they can get Deer, they're getting one of the best in the country, like you said. I think he's number 2 in the industry rankings. So obviously a home run commitment if they get him. But also when you look at what they've stockpiled, pretty good. I mean, last year we haven't really talked enough about Daniel Hill and Kevin Riley. I think mainly because Kevin was quiet until the end. Riley, from Tuscaloosa, committed to Miami, kind of quiet. They made a push at the end and landed him. And Daniel Hill sent us on a roller coaster, up and down for months. So obviously a big get. Let's change gears a little bit to Jaden Harmon, linebacker from Georgia. Didn't just decommit from Alabama yesterday. He flipped to Tennessee. BamaOnLine had that a few hours before it happened. Caught wind that he had planned to flip. Give us some of your thoughts on that right now, Andrew, and where that leaves Alabama at the linebacker position.
I think going into yesterday morning, if you would have told me that he was going to flip, we would all have been surprised, because he had just done an interview with BOL recently talking about how solid he was with his commitment. He only took a visit to Tuscaloosa, during that late July window, attended the Champions Cookout. Now, he did take a couple visits in June. Took an official to Alabama, but then took an official to Ohio State. Well, he was calling Alabama during that weekend, telling them, hey, there's nothing to worry about. Solid with my decision. Don't worry about Ohio State, but I guess you had to be worried about Tennessee a little bit. They were in the kind of, I guess, behind the scenes, still recruiting them, still pushing for them. But it was a little bit of a surprise when he flipped. But you look at Alabama's linebacker class, and they had 4 inside linebacker commitments at the time. And we talked about this, outside of BOL. We talked about how it was going to be hard for Alabama to hold on to all 4 of those guys. And you never wanted to say, this guy's going to flip or this guy's on, he's going to start taking visits in the fall, because you just didn't know. You wanted to kind of wait it out, see what happens, see who decided to take some visits. But all of these guys were kind of coming out saying that they were solid. But with Jaden Harmon, decided to flip Tennessee. Do we think that's a humongous loss for Alabama? Probably not, because they have 3 other inside linebacker commitments, and you still heavily targeting a big guy down in Florida, which I'll let you talk about. But I think they're still fine. If they lost another one, obviously, you start to look and see who else might be available that you can recruit, that you can potentially add. But they still have 3 inside linebacker commitments. But Jaden Harmon, great player. Should have a good season for Rome. And I'm not sure if Alabama's going to continue to go down that road with him. He flipped to Tennessee, and a lot of times Alabama just kind of lets those guys go.
I'd expect Alabama is going to just let that one go. I mean, they had, like you said, there was 4. We knew the whole time that still pursuing Tai Jackson. Harmon was a guy that had asked about the depth chart, recruiting, and all that kind of stuff. I think if any of the 4 did decommit, I think Harmon was the most likely. The timing was odd because Joseph Hastings, who's still traveling Italy in his capris and toeless sandals, he had interviews saying he was 100% committed. But at the same time, I mean, when a kid's not really going to tip his hand. He's not going to tell the Alabama people, yeah, I'm on the verge of flipping. That's going to ruin the story, ruin the suspense. So I think that's one thing to factor in. But again, 4 inside linebacker commitments at the time. They're down to 3. And it's kind of went full circle, because for a month, there was a lot of fans pissed that there was only inside linebackers committed. They were just like, we got too many. So, there's one less right here. I do agree Harmon's going to be a good player. I don't think it was a make or break, and especially again, when you have 4 committed at that spot, I think that's one spot you're comfortable, because they still got to go out and find a safety. There's still areas of concern that they've got to address. Safety, no commitments right now, still working on stuff like that, working on prospects like that. And again, senior season just kicked off. Going to another of the inside linebackers who's had an interesting saga is Luke Metz.
Yep.
Luke Metz, who was a hot topic depending on who you were asking when he committed to Alabama. A lot of people kind of put him at that mid-level. And since that, he's had quite the glow up. He's had a lot of interest. He had a good first game, opening game. They're using him on offense. Luke is the inside linebacker committed from Mill Creek, Georgia, committed to Alabama very early in the process, got the full court press from Georgia, and then this weekend picked up another huge offer.
Yeah, it's always funny with the state of Georgia. If you don't have a Georgia offer from the very get go and you go out of state, it means that you weren't good enough for Georgia. But then you commit out of state, and all of a sudden the in state school starts paying a little bit more attention to you. And we saw that a few years ago with guys like Will Anderson and Brian Branch. Those guys didn't have Georgia offers going into the spring, and then they commit to Alabama. All of a sudden, Georgia starts recruiting them. Their interest level, skyrockets, and obviously both those guys turned out to be pretty good players in Tuscaloosa. And you look at Luke Metz; he had a lot of big offers early in the spring. I mean, Michigan, Ole Miss, Texas A&M took some,
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma took some visits, but grew up an Alabama fan. Big Alabama fan growing up. So when Alabama offered him, he took those visits and ends up committing. But we've seen his stock kind of raise over the course of the last few months with the Georgia offer, as you mentioned. They went hard after him. He even took an official visit to Georgia on June the 14th before coming back to Tuscaloosa for the official. And now he's got an offer from Oregon, from Dan Lanning, who obviously has coached in Tuscaloosa and at Georgia. This is obviously another big offer for Luke. I don't think it really changes much as far as his recruitment. I mean, he went to Georgia, in-state school, one of the top programs obviously in the country, and said, "Hey, thanks, but no thanks. I'm committed to Alabama." Now, if I'm Luke Metz, I am thinking, hey, why not take a free trip out to Oregon and see a game out there? I've never been out there before, so why not take that free trip? So that may happen. We'll kind of wait and see what he decides to do. But I spoke with Luke on Sunday evening. Talked a little bit about his first high school football game of the season, which we'll have a full story on BOL a little bit later today. But I'm not too concerned about that Oregon offer. I think he's still pretty locked in with the Crimson Tide.
I love recruiting because of the perception and the roller coasters. I mean, the Georgia offer, and let's be clear, it was a Georgia full court press for Luke Metz. This wasn't some offer to
Right.
say I offered or worried about the portal. I mean, he was talking to Glenn, FaceTiming with Glenn Schumann, very hands-on recruiter, really good inside backer. Got him on campus, went out and evaluated him in the spring. I mean, this was a full court press from Georgia. Kind of quieted the crowd, a little bit of the Bama fans that doubted him. I mean, I still think there's some. He's 3-star, that's what a lot of people stop and look at. But a lot of college coaches really like what he does on the football field. And again, playing on both sides of the ball, motivated guy. It's good to see him get his due. Now, flipping back to Jaden Harmon, one of the interesting aspects I find of this is, and we were discussing this on the BOL roundtable, which was hopping yesterday. It was a Sunday fun day. We were moving pretty quickly, but Tennessee went after Jaden Perlotti, who ended up at USC, who Alabama took in for a visit, but were happy with the guys they had. They also pushed hard for Abdul Sanders. They pushed hard for both of them until they went back to Jaden Harmon. So Sanders was a guy they actually sort of seemed to prioritize based on the push they had with him. But going forward, we haven't talked enough about Tai Jackson. We need to talk about the 5-star backer from Florida. I mean, he's going to be able to name his school. It's one of the most physical. The thing that impresses me as a player is he's 200 pounds, 205 pounds, whatever he is. He hits like Reuben Foster. I mean, somehow his leverage and his strength that he comes through. But tell us a little bit about Ty and what you think as far as Alabama's chances.
Well, I think the fact that he's already made 3 visits to Alabama since Coach DeBoer's staff took over, I think that speaks a lot as far as his interest level in Alabama. I think the biggest thing with him right now is seeing the product on the field, and that's kind of why he wants to take it all the way until December. He wants to see a lot of these schools. He wants to, Florida's been a program that's been on him for a long time, and he wants to see what Billy Napier and that staff's able to do this season because let's be frank, Billy Napier is probably on the hot seat heading into the year, and he's got some tough games. So if Florida can pick things up this season, have a good season, Florida's going to have a very realistic chance. But he wants to kind of go throughout the season, see how players perform, or see how teams perform, see how coaches coach, especially at Alabama, because you have a completely new defense. Now, I said this the other day on the BOL roundtable. Deontay Lawson came out and said, this is a defense for inside linebackers. So, you have the guys on your team that are excited about, what they're going to be able to do this season in this defense. all these kids are wanting to see what this defense is able to do and see if they can kind of fit in. So we expect Ty to be back in Tuscaloosa for that Alabama Georgia game, and Georgia's one of the top contenders in his recruitment as well. So I think it's all about just how are they going to perform on the field? Does he see himself in this style of defense, and obviously the relationships with the coaching staff.
Now, I did misspeak. He's not a 5-star, which kind of blows my mind. On three has him in the top 25 in the country. I think he's top 100 overall in the composite. He is 79, but he is a heavy hitter and inside, very athletic inside backer.
Number one inside linebacker per on three.
Yeah, yeah, definitely has earned his his spot, and that's a good point. Florida's going to be interesting to me because Napier and them need not just wins on the field, but wins off the field. There's got to be some guys they circle, and we've seen that this year. I mean, we've seen staffs. Tennessee, for instance, with David Sanders, that was a guy they just didn't want to lose. You see guys doing it right. You see schools digging in deep on certain players, and that's when it can get wild. That's when the back and forth gets wild, and you got an agent, you have multiple schools in there bidding. I think Kalen DeBoer and staffs did a pretty good job of avoiding that kind of situation. I think their offer is their offer for the most part. Unless it's a guy that's just too good to pass up, I think that could change things. But I think Nick Saban did it the same way. The offer is what it is, and this is kind of how we've set the table for certain players. And you go out and make that push because we've seen some wild ride. Josiah Sharma. Me and you would have both had him in our class in February, March, April, and May, maybe even into June, and then it turned into an NIL deal where Bama was left a distant third simply by, hey, we've done what we can do. And next thing you know, he's committed to Oregon, which was a surprise. He flipped to Texas, which was a surprise. He said he's locked in, but we got 3+ months. You know what I mean? So anytime you get to that level. All right, Andrew, you wanted to discuss some of the 2027 rankings. Is that
Yeah,
right? We got some what happened to 2026? Did we miss
man,
a whole did I
it's
miss a whole year?
26.
I mean, it's like we missed a whole year. We have talked more about 2027. And of course, Alabama's already got a few commitments in that 2027 class. So that's why we're focusing on the rankings. But here's a little bit with the recent rankings that have came out, and let's begin some discussion on that.
Yeah, so a couple of the websites are going ahead and releasing their early top 100 for the 2027 cycle, which is kind of crazy to believe. But I think when we first started out, we wouldn't even do interviews with
No.
kids until after their junior season, and now you're getting top 100 lists for sophomore. So this is the sophomore class for those that don't know. Alabama already has 2 sophomore commitments so far, both in state. Barack Willis out of Moody High School, who is ranked as an edge, plays linebacker, plays on the edge for Moody High School, kind of plays all over the field. And I think the biggest thing with him is what position is he going to play in the next 3 years once he gets to college. I think we're going to have to wait and see. But he's ranked number 82 overall in the top 100 for 2027. And then you have Jabarius Gar, excuse me. He's another edge, 6'2", 215 pounds, guy that can. I think he's going to be an edge. I think he's that wolf type player. Kind
Yeah.
of reminds you a little bit of Justin Hill, Dawson Merritt, kind of coming out of high school. But he's a guy that's ranked right now number 89 overall in the top 100. So Alabama has 2 commitments in 2027, both in that early top 100. So it's going to be interesting because it's 27. I mean, there's a long way to go in that recruiting cycle. A lot of evaluation points during these next couple of years. So we certainly expect that that list is going to change significantly. But this is just kind of an early look at who some of the top guys are in that 27 class.
Yeah, and we don't want to overlook the 2026 because they do have a commitment. It just seems like it was a long time ago. They've got Dorian Barney from Carrollton, played a pretty exciting game on Friday night. It was on ESPN, one of the ESPNs. Had a good game, looks like a player, made some plays out there. So he's committed. He's another top 100 overall prospect. But we're seeing the 2027 to me is most fascinating because there's so much that can change. I mean, we see a lot of movement from junior to senior year, right? I mean, London Simmons, again, this is a guy that's lost 40 pounds. Really excited to see him this year. Guys change, they get bigger, they get stronger, they change their body. You see what they do as freshmen in college. So much things can change. But from sophomore to senior, I mean, there's no telling. You can even look at this class right now that we thought was going to be an elite Alabama class. And I think it's a good class. I mean, you got kids committed all over the country, Alabama, Auburn, Ohio State. You got kids committed everywhere. But at the time when they were sophomores, when Ryan Williams was a sophomore, Naeem Offord, the cornerback from Parker, is committed to Ohio State. We thought this was going to be an elite, we knew there'd be 2 5 stars in this group, more than likely, with Ryan Williams, who reclassified to 2024 and offered. But I mean, we thought there could possibly be up to 4. Micah DeBose was a top 30 guy at that time. And Mike is a guy, Micah DeBose from Mobile, committed to Alabama, early commitment to Georgia. That was his sophomore year, right? After his sophomore year, I believe.
Yep, committed
So he
after.
was coming off a sophomore year, already committed to Georgia, who was, competing or winning national championships. So that's how good that group was. But so much can change between now and then, and good things happen. You see guys emerge, guys you didn't know about. So it's going to be interesting to watch. All right, Andrew, changing gears once again. Before we do that, last request, please give us a like and subscribe, a thumbs up. We always appreciate that, the support you guys give us. We read the comments and everything. We appreciate all that. We're going to start doing live shows here in the future. We've been taping these lately as we figure out how to actually do the
Let us know if
format.
you want Tim to bring back his headset too.
I can't even explain that. For anybody that didn't see the show Friday, I was wearing the headset. I had an audio issue, and I was directing
Ready
flights.
for takeoff with Tim Watt.
Well, the worst part about that is that, to me, I can't hear anything but you talking, so I couldn't hear. I mean, it's like being locked in a closet, but which I know you're familiar with, but I'm not. So so let's change gears. All right, we got an opening weekend. The Kalen DeBoer airs here in less than 2 weeks now. We're not expecting a huge visitors list for that. I think it's still to be determined. I mean, it's not a sexy game. And part of that to me is if you can only go to one Alabama game, it's probably not going to be Western Kentucky, right? Which one do you think everybody's going to? I called it Woodstock on the board. I mean, the old Woodstock, not the 99. I'm talking about the old one. I think that's kind of what that recruiting list is going to look like.
Yeah, it's Luke Metz. He's one of the guys that has already told us that he's going to be back in Tuscaloosa. You'll probably see more, your local commitments that are going to be, in Tuscaloosa for home games. Outside of the SEC home games, your Western Kentuckys, your South Floridas, you're going to see, local high school players, maybe not even guys that Alabama's heavily recruiting, but they're in-state kids. You send the tickets out, you get them on campus, maybe they're a walk-on down the road. But, I think when we kind of look at this schedule moving forward, you circle a few games. Obviously, the Alabama-Georgia game on September the 28th. You got Alabama, South Carolina. You got Alabama, Missouri. Obviously, the Iron Bowl. The Georgia game is going to be really interesting because that's not the only big game going on in the state of Alabama that day. Oklahoma is traveling to Auburn on September the 28th as well. So you're going to have a lot of recruiting battles to bring kids to your campus on that day. So who's going to make it to campus? Obviously Alabama and Auburn are recruiting a lot of the same in-state kids for 26, 27, not as many 25 guys, but you're battling and trying to pull guys in different directions. So, you're going to go to the Alabama-Georgia game? Are you going to go to the Alabama or the Auburn-Oklahoma game that weekend? So that's going to be interesting. That's kind of a storyline that we're going to see in the next month.
Well, even on that 31st, you got a lot of teams at home. You got big games. You got Clemson and Georgia. Tennessee's got a home game. Running down the list, Texas has a home game, and don't forget Miami and Florida are playing in Gainesville. That's going to be a pretty attractive game for people to go to. Ole Miss is at home. Notre Dame, Texas A&M. So you got a lot of guys playing at home. So it'll probably be a divided crowd to some degree. I mean, that Miami Florida game that will be an interesting, huge impact game for everybody's saying Napier's on the hot seat. I don't think Mario Cristobal can lose that and not catch some heat
Right.
himself, right? I mean, that's a really big game for two coaches we're very familiar with. Obviously, Mario Cristobal, Billy Napier, both friends of the program, coached at Alabama, head coaches at Florida and Miami right now. So, yeah, I'd imagine that Georgia game, maybe similar, I think, possibly to that LSU-Alabama game the year everybody showed up, 9-6. They showed up to watch a soccer game or a or a middle school baseball game. That wasn't as exciting. It was exciting if you're a defensive guy, but crowd was off the chain. It was a night game and all that. But I think it'll be a very crowded thing. And also, I think the kids, having taken so many visits this summer, might not be as in tune because it's a, people don't look at it, but it's an effort. I mean, if you have to get on a plane, you have to, I mean, there's an effort even to drive from, from here to Athens, from Birmingham to Athens. There's a lot of effort that goes into that. You make family trips. We made family trips. That's a time consuming thing. Even to go to a game at Tuscaloosa, you're investing a good 8 hours of your day getting there, getting parked, getting in, getting out, and everything else. So,
These kids are playing high school games on Friday nights, and they could
that's a,
be, they could be traveling, 2 hours away to a road game, and having to travel back, and then get in the car and driving to the airport. I mean, it's a process. It's not always very easy to
yeah.
get to Tuscaloosa the next day, especially if you live outside outside of the Southeast. Because we've talked to a lot of the California guys, and they're all hoping to make it to Tuscaloosa for the Georgia game. They've got the invite, they're ready to come, but they just won't know until a little bit closer to kickoff. I was talking to Jackson Cantwell, who's a number 4 overall player in the 26 class a couple weeks ago, and he's got that game kind of circled on his calendar as a game because he's got Alabama and Georgia as 2 of his top schools. But still not going to really know until we get a little bit closer to game time if he's going to be able to make that trip.
And there's other factors. Teenagers want to be with their girlfriend or play pickleball or the new NCAA football games out. I mean, there's a lot of stuff where guys just like to hang out. I know it's always funny where like a kid doesn't make a visit and the grown-ups are like, he could have came if he wanted, they get pretty upset when a kid, they always think like some heaven forbid anybody gets sick in their family. Now, don't get us wrong. Sometimes that is an excuse, but sometimes people really get sick. I mean, these, the moms, I don't know about, I would not let my 17-year-old drive from here to Texas to Austin. You know what I mean? There's no prayer on with me in the car anyways. They might could do it on their own, but anyways, a schedule much more beneficial to Alabama this year for visitors. Last year it just seemed like a wash. One game, the Texas game to me overall. But I mean, obviously you got Auburn, which will be crazy. You got South Carolina, Georgia. You got a lot of stuff happening here. So pretty good schedule and a road schedule for them to get where they want to be. And for you who aren't on BamaOnLine.com, y'all are missing out right now. There is Charlie Potter. We just hired Blake Bliner, young guy doing some stuff. Jimmy Stein giving opinions, a lot of news, a lot of happenings out there. Totally different for us seeing the tweets that we see from the coaching staff. We see Kalen DeBoer doing interviews all over. It's just been a completely different era. Some people don't like it. Some people love it. I think it's been good. I think it's what you expected with a younger coaching staff. Let's talk about the hot topic. I mean, there's been a lot. Bama's had 3 decommitments: Antonio Coleman, Derek Smith, and Jaden Harmon. There's been a lot of questions, the effort of the recruiting staff. I think we should address that at least, in the fact that, in my opinion, and I'll let you chime in here after, I don't think you work as hard as you do from February, March, April, May, and June. And we saw the work to quit recruiting them in July and August. I don't think that's it. I think there's a lot that factors into these recruitments. Now, NIL does factor in.
Mm-hmm.
NIL absolutely factors in. I think the myth is whether or not it's the deciding factor. It's not always the deciding factor. You can get a discount. We saw that with Nick Saban. We saw it with Nate Oates, who does a great job of it. If it's a deciding factor, it's going to be hard for Alabama to win that battle, in my opinion, because they're just not going to do it. Same for Nick Saban. But if it's reasonable, I think they got enough to sales behind them. But I think the effort's there. I mean, these kids are talking to the coaches. We talk to the kids. We talk to the parents. I mean, they're doing everything they are. The problem is, I think you opened all your presents for Christmas in June and July, and there just wasn't many presents left afterwards. That's why the board got so small. But now senior year's here. A few spots have opened up. Andrew, give us some thoughts on that.
Yeah, people go asking us after the Champions Cookout why more players weren't committing after the cookout. Well, 90% of the guys that went to Alabama's Champions Cookout were Alabama commitments because they all committed during the summer. And then a few more who had not committed they end up committing a couple weeks later, and the two sophomores, Barack Willis and Jabarius Gar. So I think with Alabama right now, they're currently sitting with 20 commitments. In a pretty good spot, number 2 recruiting class in the country, but there weren't a lot of spots left. They'd filled up pretty much every single position. Now you have the decommitments, but I think those are guys that they're going to. I don't know if they're going to continue to pursue Antonio Coleman. Don't think they're going to continue to pursue Jaden Harmon, but they're certainly going to continue to pursue Derek Smith. I mean, that's been a guy that is an in-state kid, top 2 player in the state of Alabama. It's top safety, one of the top safety recruits, but he's also a wide receiver. So it all kind of depends on what position does he really want to play in college. And Auburn has definitely recruited him to play wide receiver the entire time. So gonna be interested to see how that all unfolds. But I mean, I think Alabama is in a pretty good spot. You got to fill some needs still. Safety, defensive line still an area that I think they would like to get at least one high school kid. I think a lot of people tend to forget that there is another place that you can recruit players, and that is in the transfer portal. And what we saw with Coach DeBoer, Courtney Morgan, that staff at Washington is, they did not jump and extend offers to every single player in the state of Washington. They waited and they spent a lot of time recruiting from the transfer portal. And I think that they're going to do that this year as well. I don't think they're rushing to try to just fill needs at certain positions. If they feel like this guy can help them, they're going to extend an offer and push for them. But if not, they're not trying to get new bodies. They're just trying to get players that can help the team. If they can't get somebody at the safety position, hey, look in the transfer portal. That's what they're going to do.
I mean, when you look at the portal, I was looking at it last night and we were discussing it on the round table. I mean, you're looking at, Parker, Proctor, 2 offensive line, there's 2 starting offensive linemen, Jeremy Bernard, starting wide receiver, maybe wide receiver 1. You got Keon Saab, you got LT Overton, who we can't stop talking about. There's 5 starters right there.
Damani
LT
Jackson,
Overton, Damani Jackson is 6. I mean, there's
Deshaun Jones. So
I mean, there's so many guys in the portal. Now they don't want to go completely to the portal, but when you look at the safety position, if you're losing a Keon Saab, and this would have been the same for Caleb Downs, you're not really replacing them for the most part, with a high school senior, an incoming freshman. That's just not going to be equal. Now, Caleb Downs is that special kind of player. If you can get him to come in, he probably could contribute as a freshman as he did at Alabama. But you're going to look for an experienced guy to replace that experience while getting young guys to develop. So there's just a lot of angles here. For this, but I think the biggest thing is you want to avoid. You don't want anybody at your university just for the money. You don't want them like that because that's going to be a never-ending cycle of negotiations and going into the portal window. We've already heard horror stories, not really aimed at Alabama, but I mean that's been a factor with some of the kids who left Alabama with just higher NIL. So
yeah, and
that's
you
our
remember
final.
last year, if you remember around December, we talked about this a lot, and just from hearing from different people, there were a lot of top end guys that entered the transfer portal, and everybody's asking us on the message board, hey, is this a guy that we're going to go after? Or people are tweeting out, this, X 5-star recruit, let's go after him. Well, a lot of times those phone calls do happen, but they're short phone calls because you hear how much these guys actually want from an NIL perspective. So it's not like Alabama didn't inquire on some of those guys, but it was just a short phone call and said, thanks, but no thanks. We're going to look somewhere else.
Yeah, I think that some schools are just going to go all in for certain players. We know David Sanders certainly got up there with the NIL. That was quite the battle. I think that was really Nebraska and Tennessee at the end. I think Ohio State had faltered because of the NIL. But yeah, there's a lot of factors going in. I think the biggest thing, my last thought here, is that the NIL is going to factor in every recruitment to some degree. It's going to be various degrees, but it's factoring in. There's a discussion about it. I just think when it gets straight, like Randy Moss said, straight cash, homie, I think that it's going to be hard to compete. And I don't think there's any university that can compete with everybody just with the NIL. I mean, we saw Oregon can't. Phil Knight won't be denied, can't get beat. He lost guys. They committed guys that flipped. They had one flip to Tennessee, in fact, and we're told for less NIL money. So it's not always the end all be all. If it is, I think you know what you're dealing with, and it's a straight business decision. Andrew, hit us with some final thoughts and carry us out of here.
Yeah, I mean, really looking forward to covering another commitment decision tomorrow in AK Deer. So we're going to be looking forward to that. We got a lot of great content coming to BOL throughout the week. Go over to BamaOnLine.com. Check it out. Charlie and those guys do a tremendous job of providing a lot of excellent team coverage content. Obviously, we've got recruiting locked down over there, but go check us out. Get on the BOL Roundtable. That's our premium message board. That's where we have the most discussions every single day. You get to watch us on this show. If you go to the BOL Roundtable on BamaOnLine.com, you get to talk to us every single day, pretty much all day and all night long. So go check us out at BOL, and we'd love to see you over there.
We appreciate you guys and gals. Thank y'all for tuning in. We hope to see you later in the week. And in the meantime, roll tide and join BOL. Come talk to us. Give it a try. Andrew's giving away that Masters hat. I'm just kidding. He's not. He didn't even go get it. Someone brought it to him, though. But we appreciate everybody for tuning in. Thumbs up and like, and we'll see you later in the week.